So today on Screenshots, as part of my Oscar series, we're going to take a look at what I consider the best Oscar award ceremony of all time. Now, this was in 1975, and it came after one of the most successful years in Hollywood, 1974. Now, the 47 Academy Awards were presented on April 8, 1975 at the Venerable Dorothy Chandler Pavilion of LA. Now, the hosts were just a tremendous Rat Pack group of Bob Hope, Shirley MacLaine, Sammy Davis Jr., and Frank Sinatra. And this, of course, was the last year NBC hosted the ceremonies because ABC has held the broadcast rights actually ever since then. We're up 44 years. Now, the reason why the ceremony was quite interesting, it was because of the ongoing battle for Best Picture that year between Godfather Part 2, Francis Ford Coppola, and Chinatown, which Jack Nicholson, some people believe is his best performance. Now, Robert Evans had a part in both movies because he produced the original Godfather and produced Chinatown, so it was a battle within the Robert Evans family, might say. Godfather Part 2 actually almost, not say swept the Oscars, but had a great success. It won twice as many Oscars as The Godfather won 2 years before. It won 6, and it was also the last movie to receive 3 acting nomination in single acting category: Strasberg, Gazzo, and of course the winner Robert De Niro. Now, father and son Carmine and Francis Ford Coppola combined for 4 awards. Carmine winning Best Original Score, while Francis Ford Coppola won for Picture Director and Best Screenplay adapted from other material, with, of course, the great Mario Puzo. Now, and this was the only Oscars also as well where in one category, all 5 Best Costume Design nominations came from the same studio, which of course was a great Paramount. But the 1974-75 year, the 75 awards, really stand out because you had so many great films nominated. Besides the ones I mentioned, the Lenny Bruce story with Dreyfuss came out. You had A Towering Inferno, great disaster movie. A Woman Under the Influence, one of John Cassavetes' best movies. Francis Truffaut's Day for Night. You had Claudine with Diane Carroll. You had Murder on the Orient Express. Albert Finney had a great performance. Art Carney as well in Harry and Tonto. It was one of Jeff Bridges' first major nominations besides for the Bogdanovich film a few years before. Actually, I visited the site of where Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, his Clint Eastwood movie, was filmed, and let me tell you, I was walking in history that day near the gates in the Mountain Stewart. Now, and there was one major Canadian nomination actually. Mordecai Richler, who his great book Apprenticeship of Judy Kravitz, also starring Richard Dreyfuss, got a nomination and almost defeated The Godfather Best Screenplay, but I think it was their years. And again, the best documentary that year, Hearts and Minds, talking about the Vietnam War. It was overall a great amount of nominations, and it was a Blazing Saddles years too, because not only was Blazing Saddles nominated, Mel Brooks, Young Frankenstein also got nominations as well. So the Mel Brooks oeuvre was huge that year, and we also had what they call cult films as well. Great Gatsby was that year. There was our Marcel Marceau movie that was nominated, and of course The Longest Yard. Now, Special Achievement Awards went to the creators of Earthquake, and the honorary award went to the great Jean Renoir and Howard Hawks, who presented his award by John Wayne. Now, for the presenters, this was a who's who of the studio system. It goes on and on. We had Ron O'Neill and Tatum O'Neill, Roddy McDowell, Brendan Vaccaro, Danny Thomas, Lauren Hutton, Ingrid Bergman, who also won Best Supporting Actress that year. Again, Bob Hope, Gene Kelly, Joseph Bottoms, Deborah Raffin, John Way, like I said, Johnny Green, Lauren Bacall, Peter Falk, Catherine Ross, Susan Blakely, O.J. Simpson, John Voight, Raquel Welch, McDonald Carey, Jennifer O'Neill, Susan George, Jack Boom Boom Valenti, the head of the motion picture industry group, Goldie Hawn, Robert Wise, James Michener, Glenda Jackson, Jack Lemmon, and Warren Beatty. And for the best song presenters, they had Frankie Lane, Johnny Green, Jack Jones, the Love Boat guy, of course, and Aretha Franklin. And there was a lot of surprises at the Oscars without we expect. We knew Godfather was going to fight against Chinatown, but Art Carney for Harry and Tonto. He was never known too much for his movie roles, although he was a star on television on Twilight Zone, The Honeymooners for years and years previously. His victory was considered a slight upset because he was up against Pacino and Nicholson, and the idea about the actress category was there was a lot of words that maybe Ellen Burstyn wasn't going to win for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore because it was a Scorsese movie, and Scorsese at a time, not say he was an unknown, but he didn't have enough much pull in Hollywood. And actually, that's the first time Scorsese was probably seen on the Oscar stage, to my memory, and he accepted for Ellen Burstyn, who was so nervous she didn't want to show up. Now, De Niro didn't show up to get his Best Supporting Actor award, but it was well deserved. But the whole show, I've seen it in repeats. It went off pretty well without a hitch, even though the end of the show had the Rat Pack singing "That's Entertainment" for seemed to be 7 or 8 minutes. But when you have a show that has Bob Hope, John Wayne, Robert Wise, all the great old guard of Hollywood with the new guard, Raquel Welch, John Boyd, Ronnie McDowell too as well, who many people believe were snubbed because it wasn't a right nomination process for Cleopatra. It really stood out as a link to the hippie 70s and the 1950s and 60s studio system and a modern Hollywood that was coming close with Spielberg, Lucas, Coppola, everybody else. It was that balance, and the stage that night was beyond beautiful. It was probably the best decorated stage ever. The producers of the show, to me, hit a home run in every aspect. They had the right people, the right era, and the stars in the audience was, again, just like a plethora of the great creators through the years. But it's fun to see, to look back at the old tapes. Robert Evans's half mullet, he had broken up with, if I'm not mistaken, Ali MacGraw at the time. Godfather 2, where Coppola was almost snubbed in the near cabaret sweep 2 years before. Coppola's multiple Oscars made him one of the major players for 30 years afterwards, but we'll get that in a future podcast of what killed his major player, Godfather 3. That's all I can say. And you can blame two things, but we'll talk about the future podcast. Now, if you have a chance, the Academy Award official site has different portions of the show, not the full show, but different performances and presentations. It is probably a shock to many people, knowing how bad the awards have been the last few years, with a lack of momentum or lack of playing. Everybody waited for this Oscars because they weren't sure, again, if The Godfather 2 would knock off Chinatown, and if, Pacino would finally get that award. It was kind of getting elusive, and it seemed like it was kind of a battle of different theories of where Hollywood was going. But with Duddy Kravitz especially, you were seeing more and more the independent ideas about writing getting more and more recognized. But and I'm sorry I didn't mention the Conversation was also part of this too that year. Another tremendous performance with Gene Hackman and another Francis Ford Coppola movie, and Albert Finney from Murder on the Orient Express. Just tremendous. So there was not a bummer in the bunch. I mean, people criticized Towering Inferno, but I mean, Fred Astaire getting nominated, that was a great recognition of his career. And again, Bridges getting it at the second nomination of his career. And, Diane Ladd was in the mix too, Talia Shire, Madeline Kahn. It was a great, like I said, a great year for Oscar, a great year for movies. So if you're home tonight, bored, do best to go on YouTube. Check out, again, this year's Academy Award winners, and you will never regret it. But I think the best part for me was seeing Frank Sinatra's new toupee, because I don't think it was big enough to fit his head. In future appearances on the Oscar, he had these bigger toupee. But if you look closely, it's like, it's still, not Frank Sinatra. He didn't look like Frank Sinatra of the late 60s, but later on, he more looked like Frank. It was almost like an impersonator. That's what it stood for me. And one thing I know it's weird, some people do criticize the nomination for Valerie Perrine for playing Honey Bruce and Lenny. Valerie Perrine, very underrated actress. She was in Superband later on. But it was rising stars were recognized here, established stars, Europeans. Overall, I think it was just a tremendous show and nominees. So as we like to say in the North Shore, and we like to say to people all over, keep your stick in the ice. Have a good one. Bye.